Are you kidding me?
After a week of chaos that was supposed to be concentrated on constituents, the House was back in action. Everyone was there, well, except for the one guy that is probably embarrassed to be showing his face right now.
Let's take a look.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This weekend in Cloverdale, 15,000 people lined up in the pouring rain for the hopes that they might get a few rejected potatoes. It was Ugly Potato Day in that city. And 15,000 British Columbians are too hungry and desperate that they needed to go and collect those rejected foodstuffs. 2 million Canadians are lined up at food banks. There are 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario today. And what is the Prime Minister doing? Working to save his political skin from his revolting caucus. This can't go on. Will he call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I would really hope that every single MP in this House would agree that in our great country, no one should ever go hungry. But when Conservatives talk about the most vulnerable, they are crying crocodile tears. And how do I know that, Mr. Speaker? I know that because they have had the gall to vote against a national school food program, a program that will feed 400,000 Canadian kids. How can they look themselves in the face when they oppose feeding Canadian kids?
Yes, that's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Is she serious?
So you have a Liberal government that spends hundreds of billions of dollars, plunges our country into debt. As a result, you skyrocket inflation, causing everything to be more expensive, causing housing to be twice as expensive, rent to be twice as expensive. You put a carbon tax on everything. You're now putting a digital services tax on everything to make everything that's digital even more expensive than it already is. And you are turning around and saying, well, these darn Conservatives, they're not voting against this program where we want to spend even more money to hire even more public servants to do basically nothing, while then we get to decide what your children eat.
Right. Instead of starting a national school food program, which, as Ryan said, is going to take more public servants, more bureaucracy, why don't you just lower taxes so that Canadians can pay for their own food? That's all we want. We want to be self-sufficient.
And gee, that would actually be saving money for everyone.
That program, though it has costed millions, has not fed a single hungry child. It has fed bureaucracy, which is all it ever was intended to do. Meanwhile, 2 million people are lined up at food banks. We've got 15,000 people that will line up for a, quote, ugly potato because they can't afford to eat. We have diseases like scurvy that are back. And 1 in 4 kids go to school hungry after 9 years of this Prime Minister, yet his priority is saving his political career from his revolting caucus. This cannot go on. Will he call a carbon tax election today?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are damning themselves with their own words. I was at a school in downtown Winnipeg on Friday. I was there with Premier Wab Kinew, and we gave those beautiful, wonderful children some bannock, a little carton of milk, some jam, some butter, and a banana. That was not bureaucracy that fed those kids. That was the deal we've done with Manitoba. The Conservatives are against feeding kids.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Are you kidding me? She says that the Canadians should be happy that while 1 in 4 kids go to school hungry, while 2 million people line up at food banks, while scurvy is making a comeback after 9 years of this government, Canadians should be grateful that she showed up with a few snacks and a photo op at one school. Mr. Speaker, this is the same finance minister who has just blown back $7 billion past her deficit target, meaning more inflation and higher rates. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister hides in the fetal position under his desk. Will he call a carbon tax election now?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
That was a great comeback.
Facts don't care about your feelings.
No, they don't.
And this is what we were talking about before, that Freeland blew past her financial guardrail of $38 billion for this year.
Well, and unless I'm mistaken, they're not permitted to be putting that capital gains tax increase through the House right now because everything's seized.
Well, they can't.
Right. So it's even worse.
So it's interesting because they're spending all this money, and they were doing so assuming they were going to have around, I think it was
19.
Well, $7 billion this year, because it's supposed to be 20 billion over like the next 3 or something like that. Don't quote me on that. But the capital gains tax was supposed to be funding some of this stuff. So they've actually, hamstrung themselves, because the capital gains portion was actually in the main budget.
And then they took it out.
And they took it out because the Conservatives were not engaging with them on that political point. So Freeland took it out in order to try to force a motion specifically on that to get the Conservatives to say that they don't like that, in order to try and pigeonhole them into this argument that they wanted to have with them over the fact that the Conservatives were out for rich people.
But now the House is seized and they can't put forward their Ways and Means motion for the capital gains tax. So nobody gets to vote on it. It doesn't get to go into law. It's in limbo.
And all Canadians should be thanking the Conservatives right now, because the capital gains tax hasn't been increased as a result of that. So, it's funny what happens when people actually have the best interests of Canadians at heart. But this is the thing. And then she talks about, we showed up out of school with some yogurt and some snacks and some jam, and that wasn't bureaucracy that fed them. It's like,
it's what's
so
the right
bad.
word? She's speaking down to Canadians when that look at these wonderful snacks that we provided, because you can't do it yourselves because we're taxing you so badly. And even though inflation was down to 1.6% last month, inflation on food keeps going up, particularly beef products.
Right. So why would that be the case? Could it be, what's those two? Oh yeah, carbon tax. Right. So don't even, Freeland, and Canadians aren't buying your crap.
Mr. Speaker, we have clearly knocked the Leader of the Opposition off his game this afternoon. Because how can he...
Did you hear the Conservative?
It was like...
And this is the difference between the Liberals, primarily Trudeau and Freeland, and Pierre and the Conservatives, in that the Liberals come into talking period with their stuff already scripted and they just recite it, right? Pierre especially is very good at thinking on his feet and adapting to what the other side says.
And the fact that, I'm sorry, I'm just hearing the Conservatives laughing over and over and over in my head. That's why I'm trying to keep it together here, because they know better. But whatever makes you happy, Freeland.
Have the temerity to talk about actual meals fed to actual children as bureaucracy. That tells you how cynical and how low these Canadians go. And then he talks about inflation. Mr. Speaker, it's been in the Bank of Canada's target range for 9 months in a row. It fell below 2% in September, and rates have come down 3 times. That's what's happening with inflation, Mr. Speaker.
Again, she's touting this as some sort of win, but if you break it down, food prices in particular are up. That is bad news for Canadians.
I'm starting to wonder if they're like, if we create a recession, then prices will go down.
I don't even think it's that. I think they have absolutely no idea what they're doing on the finance front. I mean, that's what happens when you put a journalist in the finance minister position. Yeah. And I think they're also lying to Canadians, hoping that people won't go look this information up for themselves and won't enter programs like Northern Perspective, who will look up this information and break it down.
Well, and it's interesting. We were wondering the stance that Pierre would be taking on the Liberal caucus revolt and whether he would say anything or not. So we were actually talking after the live stream last night, and where we kind of landed on this is that, you know, he would probably bring it up, but not be directly attacking, you know, the entire party, but more on directly Trudeau, so that he doesn't force the Liberal Party to kind of galvanize themselves as a party. So it sounds like that's kind of the tactic that he took, where he was insulting Trudeau for having a caucus revolt, but not insulting the people revolting themselves. Because when your enemy has something like that happening, you do not want to interrupt that at all. You want to let that play out and let your enemy essentially self-destruct. And that looks like what they're doing, but they're making sure that Canadians know that there is a caucus revolt right now. But I'm pretty sure most Canadians know that by now, because even the mainstream media has been reporting on this, much to Trudeau's dismay, and trying to turn the page on that in the news cycle, but he can't do it.
Well, I think the mainstream media has been reporting on it because they know that their end is near. This caucus revolt plus this scandal is going to be the death of the government.
And just so everybody knows, Parliament opened as expected, still frozen, still in gridlock, and the Liberals, specifically Kevin Lemmer, is losing his mind over this.
Yeah, this is the third sitting week that the House is seized. I'm just shocked. I don't know if I've ever seen this in my lifetime. They're not proroguing Parliament, and they're also not dissolving Parliament, but they're not handing over those documents to the RCMP to stop the seizure of Parliament.
So we discussed last night that some AI predicted that I was working with, that it'll be a 75% chance that there is a election called before the end of 2024.
I cannot see this going on for 2 more months. The
No.
House sits until mid-December.
No, and the Bloc keeps saying, you know, oh, they have so many more days to pass our motion, otherwise they're going to be going to an election, because confidence votes are coming. The Conservatives have 3 more motions until the end of the calendar year that they can use for confidence votes, and the NDP has 1. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but that's that's the highlights of question period. They of course have tried to attack Pierre, but he's not getting his motion or his security clearance
yeah.
and everything. Kevin Lemmer lost his mind on that, but I won't even bother showing you that. You'll just want to throw your glasses at the screen, and
if you don't wear glasses, you'll want to find some glasses
and throw
put
them
them
at the
on,
screen.
and then take them off and throw them at the screen.
That's right. So and then the NDP was doing what the NDP does, like Pierre's not getting a security clearance and all this crap, and trying to stay in the middle, as they always will. But it's going to be an interesting week, and the opening salvos have been fired. So stay tuned, folks. It's going to get even more interesting as the week progresses.